You have removed your helmet. You are no longer Mandalorian.
The creed teaches us of redemption.
Redemption is no longer possible.
Sci-fi as a genre has a tense relationship with the concept of religion. There are two basic options when it comes to portrayals of this topic. The less charitable one is to reject it as a concept altogether, to portray it as something we have moved past as a species, like superstition. The more charitable option is to introduce a spiritual aspect to remind its audience that no matter how advanced the society is, there are still things beyond human comprehension. Things we don't know and perhaps will never know. Star Wars is an outlier in this, as religion has always been a massively important theme and narrative device throughout most of its works, and all its best ones. This is definitely the case for The Mandalorian, though oddly this is something it gets criticised for from a certain subsect of fans, mainly those who have neither a stake nor an interest in the Mandalorians as a culture or people beyond, I quote, badass warriors. Though, if we look at such badass warriors throughout both fiction and our own history, we see that faith in a code and/or way of life is something that many of the best of them carry with them. In Legends, the beliefs of the Mandalorians are relatively straightforward, but interesting. They believe in warfare and strength, but not just that. They believe that warfare is necessary to progress as a society. Without it, society stagnates. If we go even deeper, Legends does not have a lot about the Mandalorians in a religious sense, but it does have an interesting story about the ancient Mandos worshipping a god of war. No surprises there. But there is also a god of peace. But what is interesting is that the god of peace is the villain in the Mandalorian story, as he is also the god of sloth. So not only from a cultural point of view, but from a religious one as well, if you are living in peace, you're living in sin. And that is so antithetical to every existing religion we have in our world that it is beyond fascinating. Which brings us to the way. In previous iterations, we've seen that the Mando's dedication to a certain way of life is more cultural than religious. Though it makes sense after their society has been decimated that they would retreat into religion as a way to cope with all they've lost. This is something we will be exploring more in the next video, along with people's complaints that they do not like these Mandos and that they are not real Mandos. But for now, let's have a look at what these Mandos believe. They have a dedication to children as the future of their tribe, and are very attached to the Mandalorian traditions of adoption, which is also detailed in Legends. They are very secretive, which again is perhaps more owed to the collapse of their society and their being hunted for their Beskar. Beskar is not just a point of cultural and historical significance and pride, it is sacred to them. And of course, there is their dedication to always wearing their helmets. The theme of religion has always been prominent in Star Wars, though we have not yet seen a good depiction of how being religious affects one's life, unless you are part of a religious or monastic order. The Mandalorian creators have taken an interest in faith and how it affects you simply in the day-to-day. And they are certainly not shy about this, as they named their main character, Religion.
Din Djarin.
Leave, apostate. I'm a Mandalorian. Weapons are part of my religion.
And we have all the hallmarks of religious belief, religious ritual, religious dogma, religious guilt, and even religious trauma sprinkled throughout this show. We hear the beliefs from the Armorer, who seem to be the spiritual leaders and keepers of history and traditions in this particular sect of Mandalorian belief. We see the ritualistic aspect through the forging of the Beskar, and even through Din himself. It is difficult for non-faithful people to put themselves in the mindset of the faithful, so when Din refuses to take off his helmet, even on pain of death, it can be a hard thing to understand and sympathise with. To many, it is just take off the helmet. Nothing is going to happen if you take it off. Why is it such a big deal? It's such a stupid thing to care about. I think we may need to look deeper in order to understand why this means so much to a person whose beliefs in something spiritual shape their personhood and morality. But it shouldn't be so hard to understand. We are all in a way shaped by what we believe, whether we can see it or not. Contrary to what some fans may believe, this is not a regression. Din did not learn his lesson after taking off his helmet. That's not how religious belief works. It makes sense that after giving up his child, he would retreat further into his belief, that he would go back to the only thing that made him feel safe back when he was a child, the last time he lost everything. How many mainstream media properties, or properties in general, can you think of that have religious characters? Maybe a few if you really think about it. How many can you think of that have religious main characters? That's a bit harder. How many can you think of where the religion deeply impacts not just the character's actions, but how the actions advance the plot? I do not know the religious leanings of the writers of this story, but this seems to be one of the very rare, insightful, yet fair and balanced looks at religion that exists today. The only other one coming to mind being Daredevil. There has been criticism of The Way from fans who again want the just badass warriors, neglecting the humanity behind a culture that truly believes in the moral good of constant warfare and how the decimation of such a society would impact them. Din's religion is not portrayed as good or bad in the show. It simply is. It has both positive and negative impacts on his life. It is venerated by its practitioners and criticised, sometimes fairly, sometimes not, by non-believers. The most prominent and highly speculated issue about Mandalorians who follow the Way is their dedication to never removing their helmets. And the Way, being a religion, turns the helmet into a religious garment. As someone with a friend who wears a religious garment, this was very interesting to me. I know slightly better than most non-believers what it would mean to have your religious code violated.
Try it and I'll kill you.
Or be put in a position where you were forced to violate them yourself. It has the potential to be legitimately traumatizing. And just because it's not a trauma you would feel as a non-religious person, doesn't mean the trauma and guilt are not real, or that the feelings are worthy of scorn, as I've seen from some critics. We must look deeper into the mindsets of others who don't think like us. The shallow complaints about the stupidity and weirdness of the helmet or any other aspect of the Way could be identical to any shallow scorn of halal meat or receiving the body and blood of Christ in Mass. If you are asking why, not out of genuine intrigue, but out of scorn, you're kind of missing the whole point. You are seeing religion as a flaw Mando must overcome. And while yes, the Children of the Watch, like every belief set, religious or otherwise, has things worthy of criticism, especially those with more absolutist leanings, it is not having the belief that is the problem. It's how you implement it.
You do not cover your face. You are not Mandalorian.
Many people with religious leanings related to Din, not only for his piousness, but for the pros and cons he encountered in his daily life because of it. From intrusive questions,
is it true that you guys never take off your helmets?
To constantly having to explain himself.
How long has it been since you've taken that off?
Yesterday.
To being slightly clueless about some aspects of the outside world.
What do you know of the Jedi?
Nothing.
To something as mundane as slightly awkward social interactions. People interpret Mando taking off his helmet here as a triumph of good sense over religious brainwashing. But what they fail to understand is that this is not only a conflict of his love for Grogu and his dedication to the Creed, because his dedication to Grogu, his foundling, is at least in part a result of being raised in that creed. So this is one part of his creed coming into conflict with another, which is something many people of faith, especially those who lead difficult lives, will have to contend with. And the more dogmatic you are, the harder this will be for you because either choice will feel like a betrayal. One very interesting and quite heartbreaking aspect of this is the very real scenario of people who have betrayed their codes and practices, whether it be their fault or not, being ostracized from their families and communities. This paints a very real and unbiased picture of what it's like to be raised in this manner. And when the answer in media today is usually a choice between be faithful and live under laws that hurt and restrict you, or abandon your faith and be free, it is truly wonderful to have a show that gives us a critical, yet fair look into a topic so influential to the lives of many, but so rarely touched upon.